Okay. Warming up.
Why did that scare you?
Perfectly timed burp.
I know, right? So well done.
Wonder why the word for it is burp.
Here we go again.
When did the very first person who did it actually go back? And then they said, "Oh, you burped." Okay, now I'm googling it. Okay. Manually resharing. If you're there, do wait. We will be starting officially in a few.
Yeah, we're just
Manually resharing.
catching up on stuff.
Hmm?
No, that was a thumbnail. You weren't wearing your glasses.
Yeah, I wasn't wearing it earlier. Ooh, I'm hitting the light. Scary.
Hey, mali. I was supposed to copy the link. Oops, I keep getting edit post. And then I didn't change anything. And then it says you have unsaved changes. It's like, how could that be? I didn't change anything.
I'm still seeing the yesterday's episode. There
Where?
you go.
YouTube?
Hey, Noel. Glad to have you with us. So, Noel, we've been burpy.
Critical update right there.
Okay, manually reshared.
I'm still sharing.
No, I haven't manually shared to the group.
And
Group.
Twitter.
Yeah, I already did on Twitter, on Facebook. Okay, it's on Twitter. Hmm, I feel sad that it looks choppy, but then it looks so clear.
It's the internet.
Yeah, I know. Just
Oh, that reminds me. I can also, well, it doesn't do much, but I'll prioritize internet to my
so
computer.
the term burp first appeared in 1930.
Manuel's like, your Dune dice holder thingy is triggering my Tripophobia. But it doesn't have a lot of holes. Come, let's bring him out.
Behind you.
Where is he?
Behind you.
Oh, I didn't realize he was there. Come on, Fred. I don't know why, but that's his name now. He's Fred. Hello. I'm undecided on like how to organize him.
It looks so tiny now.
This is Fred.
The teeth look like holes. Well, maybe we should give a side view angle just so Noel can see it's not holes. There, you see that, Noel? It's a nice teeth. It's soft teeth.
Good job, Fred.
Okay, starting in a few more minutes. It's another warm night. It's a Friday night. Yeah, I submit. Soft teeth.
Yeah, they're beads. They're plastic beads for people who are wondering. So you can super light. Mm, okay, I like this one better. Remember, my friend gave me two coffees to try.
Mm.
This one's. I think this one's better.
Noel's reacting.
He's Fred. Fred is friend. Fred.
Oh, we lost our video.
Baka Facebook, your tab lang. Try and
Yeah, yeah, there. It's back. Right. I guess we can start. We might as well start to get the talking.
Okay, can you put it back behind? Mawa naman si Noel. Bye, Fred. All right. Okay, we're gonna start. Roll intro credits. One moment.
Oh yeah! Really great!
This is Toby.
And this is Rocky.
And if it's your first time here, welcome to Baduy Pride, a little space on the internet where we talk about anything we want.
This is completely unscripted. It's not entirely accurate, but at least it's honest. Join us as we talk about everything and anything random
And
live.
if it's not your first time here, thank you so much for joining us again. This is episode 243. And to cap off Dune week,
We're talking about fears and phobias, which is actually a requested topic, but I can't remember who requested it. And let me explain the Dune connection first. So, people remember many things from Dune. The sandworms, because sand gets everywhere. They remember maybe the whole thing about water discipline, and prescience and blue eyes. But then one of the interesting bits that kind of surfaces around is that um, the Bene Gesserit sisterhood teaches something called the Litany against fear. So it is a sort of meditative statement. It's a security thing to fall back on when you are afraid of something. And actually, even for non-Dune fans, it's quite evocative, quite
Mhm.
powerful, and I will
get the full
go through it. Yeah, which is I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. And that's that's super awesome stuff. And I love this much.
Mhm.
So
It's also very insightful because it's not about resisting. It's not
you
about
can't deny fear.
it's not about it's not even about overcoming.
Yeah.
It's about allowing it to wash through you and knowing that you will still exist after it.
That fear is just a momentary feeling
Mhm.
that it will pass, and
Hey,
in
man.
the end you will remain. So that's I always felt that's like nicely empowering. And this is coming from someone who does not like horror movies.
Mhm.
But yeah, so the litany is like definitely something I cling to. It surprises me when I stumble across pieces of uh whatever merchandise that reference it without knowing it. Like
Mhm.
I know I got a shirt from SM that says fear is the mind killer. And I don't think it may have been a Dune reference, it may not have been. You know how it is with like some of these SM shirts are just ganked off the internet
Yeah.
without knowledge. So it's super nice to have. So I love the litany, and I'll share the wiki page in the Deep Right chat for people who are asking for it. But yeah, okay. So that's just like one thing to start with. So for us today, we're going to talk about uh, phobia. So the request was, of course, by Mitch. It was phrased as common phobias, the weird name phobias, myths, how to overcome them, and then insert Toby's corner for definition in history. My mythology ba. So that's the full like Mitchism suggestion thing. So ooh, it looks weird. Sorry, I just noticed that the intro video, it doesn't disappear now after playing. So it's like lingering in the sidebar. So I took it out. Okay. Yeah, so I all right, Toby, so start us off. Let's talk about fear by the book.
So phobia is actually um, used as a suffix. Phobia, phobic, or phobe, which from Greek phobos, which means fear. It occurs in technical usage in psychiatry to construct words that describe irrational, abnormal, unwarranted, persistent, or disabling fear as a mental disorder, in chemistry to describe chemical aversions,
Mm.
in biology to describe organisms that dislike certain conditions, and in medicine to describe hypersensitivity to stimulus, usually sensory in nature. In common usage, they all form words that describe dislike or hatred towards a particular thing or subject. The suffix is antonymic to fill. Hmm. Okay.
It's like
Yeah.
philatelists, right? Love of stamps. Okay. And Gab's here. Hello, Gab. Okay. So
Hey, Gab.
yeah, so that's how we get to the and I know the Greek literally the god of fear is Phobos.
Yeah,
Right,
phobos.
right. So that acronym is quite on the nose. And then we were wondering like is there a good comprehensive list of phobias to go over? Naturally there's like a Wikipedia reference, which is probably safest. um, I found an
We'll use
article.
both, and then we'll see if this one misses any of the ones there, and we'll go back and forth. Because
Yeah.
I'm always worried how um, online you have a lot of made up words,
Oh, where'd my Healthline article
which
go?
might not be the official words.
Yeah,
Official
yeah.
words. So there's always that fear.
Okay.
Fear.
Okay.
So what's the first on your list?
So this is just a list of common phobias first.
Okay.
So a 1998 survey of more than 8,000 respondents published in the British Journal of Psychiatry found that some of the most common phobias include one, acrophobia, the fear of heights.
Mhm.
And that's interesting that it's, so that's something that applies when you climb way up. I mean, I think in common parlance, you're probably gonna encounter it more if you go hiking, maybe if you go on amusement park rides,
Mhm.
right?
For some, it's just the moment you're at a higher vantage point, even if it's just one floor up, you'll look at the edge and I don't like seeing the edge.
And and not to belittle people with this condition, but like it's kind of like from a cartoon perspective that it is when you are reminded of how high up you are
Mm.
that tends to be more triggering. And
Hey,
hi, RJ.
RJ.
Yep, thanks for joining. So the next one
That's really
is interesting to me only because it's like so specific, which is aerophobia or the fear of flying.
Mhm.
And when you think about it, I mean, like, so this is a fear that was born only of like recent centuries because before there was no option
Mhm.
to fly.
Yeah.
And now, the fear of heights was refined enough
Mhm.
that there is a fear of
I,
flying.
I I can't help but wonder how much of that I have now,
Hmm.
because in the past I don't care. I fly. I'll be busy drawing. I'll be busy watching the movies, etc., etc. Now, in those last few trips we had to Singapore and stuff, I find myself getting tense, and partly perhaps because I did finish all seasons of
Aircraft investigation.
aircraft
I
investigation.
love aircraft investigation.
But at the same time, I guess it's also connected to that thing about my head now na I feel like I have so much more to lose. So now I'm so afraid of being in situations where I'm endangering myself.
So, and that's one thing to note that a lot of these fears aren't even
I get.
necessarily things you're quote unquote born with. They
Mhm.
are they are fears you may develop over
Mhm.
time. Sometimes they're a response to experiences. Sometimes they're responses more specifically to trauma. And it may be something that you weren't afraid of it before, but you suddenly develop a fear of it now, and it's interesting how the mind works in that manner. So I'm just gonna go through this list
Yeah,
because it's pretty short.
we're
Yeah.
sticking first to the common ones, then we'll go through the next list, which is everything else.
Yeah, so then there's of course arachnophobia, which I feel is the phobia term that so many people in our generation know because there was a Disney movie,
There was a Disney
a
movie,
Touchstone movie
but at the
specifically.
same time, many do say it is one of the more common, relatable phobias across the board. Um, to the point that, like in role playing games, there are actually now trigger warnings if spiders are going to be
Wow, really? I
part
didn't
of the
realize.
monsters, or because many people are affected by it
It's
to that
that deep
degree.
seated a
Yeah.
concern. Okay, okay.
I don't know though if it's because of the legs or the eyes.
Ooh, and I think it may not even be universal. I'm sure for some it's more the legs,
Hmm.
some it's more the hairy legs, some it probably is more the eyes. Okay. And oh, Jed, I guess about flight cites that he always takes the third row in the back of the plane. Okay, you have to explain that to us. What's with the third row?
Is
Is it
that statistically
survivability?
survivability thing, and then it's also near one of the exits, Jet?
That could be interesting.
Because if you watch Lost, then you wouldn't want to sit on the back of the
Nobody wants to stay in the tail if you watch Lost. Okay, so others. All right, then. Okay, then. Oh, I didn't realize this. There was a term for this. There is astrophobia, which is the fear of thunder and lightning. And I appreciate that thunder and lightning is taken together because they are friends.
Not a term I knew existed.
Me too.
Um, but it's interesting that it's astrophobia.
I mean, like then you kind of have that. I mean, we joke about animals normally. Like there are a lot of people with pet dogs who hate thunderstorms and they tend to hide. One of my sister's Pomeranian tends to hide.
Okay, I just double checked. So there is no fear of storms because there's the fear of thunder and lightning.
See, which makes it that. I think that's what's interesting about some of these phobias is that it is aspects of
Mhm.
phenomena that are scary, not the entire thing. The storm as a whole may not be scary.
Because I think maybe in studies, maybe when they were trying to define this, they had someone being pelted with artificial rain, nothing, and then you have the metal. And,
Yeah, so Noel, of course, like isn't Astra sky? Yeah, and I guess it just refers to the fact that it's a quote unquote astral phenomenon, So okay, and then there is the slightly confusing autophobia, which is the fear of being alone because it's not car, it's autonomy, it's being on-
autonomy from auto, the root word auto, right? Which
Yes.
is alone.
So yeah, so and I think this is valid. They're all valid, but I think I understand why it's common. Like because we're such social creatures, even the most introverted person still needs other people,
Mhm.
and it's scary to be alone. RJ comes along and does cite yes, a lot of people quote agoraphobia. I think it should be on this list of common ones.
Mhm.
So we'll see if we get there.
No, it's not.
Oh really? Oh interesting.
It's a term commonly used, but it's not a common fear.
Interesting. All right. Then, of course, there is the opposite, which is claustrophobia, the fear of confined spaces.
Which is the opposite of agoraphobia.
Yeah. Which, and common references to like common triggers can include things like elevators
Mhm.
when you get crammed into an elevator. And I find this interesting in the sense that I wonder what the pandemic is doing to all of us
Mhm.
because we're getting so used to self-isolating and social distancing.
And we're being torn in opposite directions. There's a part of us that's desperate now to meet people, but there's a part of us that's terrified when there are other people.
Yes.
So it's
Today we had a work meetup and then we were in masks and everything. But I couldn't shake off the concern. And then I feel
Yeah.
that way every time I go out on High Street. And then, so I was on my way home today during dinner time, and High Street is super busy. And I felt physically uncomfortable as there were more people. So I wonder if we're going to develop some sort of a new phobia.
I was
related to
thinking
it.
about that because so like I ordered lunch instead because I didn't just have the energy to prepare food.
Yeah.
So I got McDonald's, and then as I was eating it, I was like, okay, I wiped it down. I guess it's okay. Then during the meeting, I started getting phlegmy, and
Mm.
already my mind is like, oh my god, I had McDonald's, now I'm phlegmy, and it just spirals forward. But it's not like a germaphobe moment of everything has to be clean, everything has to be clean. It's just that the moment something feels wrong, your mind is already rolling it forward as to what it might be.
Mm-mm.
And I'm wondering if that's going to turn into its own distinct definition.
Yeah, like did you wipe it down enough? Did you sanitize it enough
Diba?
before touching?
But parang that's not it. That's not the root. That's just the manifestation of the root of the fear, which is
Fear of COVID. I
the,
don't know.
the
Fear
fear
of
of
infection.
having done wrong or the fear
Mm.
of slipping up or parang ganun eh. It's I don't know. I don't know how to define it.
Jed says, "Oh my God! Imagine being afraid of yourself. That could be concerning."
So that is a point many reach when they start becoming self-destructive.
Mm.
There's that, I can't be alone. I don't want to look at the mirror. It's a scary place to be.
Noel asking, I thought there was no more dine-in. Actually, so nothing has changed in the immediate future. We are in Metro Manila. We are still under what they call GCQ with heightened restrictions, which still allows for dine-in. But starting, I think October 6th,
Yeah.
we're formally August 6th, we're re-entering ECQ, enhanced community quarantine, and that's when we're going to go through stricter again, only essential services again, and then no more dine-in and stuff like that. So the current state just closes weird social activities like the gym. Although I saw some people at the going to with gym selfies, so I'm confused. All right. Anyway,
Let's finish the common list, which is down to 4.
hemophobia, fear of blood, and
I'm surprised that's higher than fear of needles.
but because I think, and maybe it's a root cause thing, like
I'm gonna check
because
now if there are fear of needles. Yeah,
there is a fear of needles, but then I don't think people necessarily are afraid of the needle in itself. We don't like it, but not to the point that it is an outright phobia. Like you tense when you see a needle,
So
but you don't like slap the doctor.
so it's a majority of the people who are just really afraid of needles, just afraid of the.
Is there a fear of getting disconnected? I wonder if there is a modern technological
We'll
fear
find out
of
the
bad
list.
internet.
Okay,
Okay.
next is
Hydrophobia, fear of water.
so that is an interesting one only because there's aquaphobia and there's hydrophobia.
Oh, okay.
So aquaphobia um, is fear of water, while hydrophobia officially is the scientific term when it repels water.
Okay. So then we can question this Healthline
Yes.
article. And it may just be because, and this may be even along the lines of nerds and geeks.
Mm-mm.
Like, depending on who you ask, there are ways that people distinguish the two in terms of definition, and it's just a matter of how people agree about it. So that's fine.
Mhm.
Next is Aphidiophobia, which is the fear of snakes.
Mhm.
So it's interesting that snakes are also one of those near universal triggering
Mm-mm.
creatures, right up there with spiders.
But even more interestingly is that there has been a growing population of people who have retic pets.
Retic pets, what do you
Snakes.
mean? Okay,
They're proud of their snakes. They feed their snakes.
okay, this sounds wrong. No, I'm kidding.
No, but it's intriguing. Even here in the Philippines, I know a few friends who have.
No, like remember my batchmate who moved to Australia, but then he left his pet snake back at home with his family, and when he comes back, he tries to visit his snake, and my God, they're keeping it alive.
So it's intriguing because it's specifically something that's very commonly a phobia, but it's gaining popularity and people are having pets.
So maybe we will overcome it. Maybe and I feel like there is a social element to
Mhm.
phobias that is if enough people normalize something, then it can be maybe eased out or weaned out of society
Mhm.
that people aren't afraid of it anymore.
So
I
I
don't
want
know.
to check if there's any roaches in the.
Try
Um,
insect.
um, No, it's just
So nothing specific to roaches, it
or
seems.
nothing specific to flying insects either.
Okay. And then there's like this generic zoophobia, which is a fear of animals.
Mhm. Which is quite common that there are people who just can't stand an animal. It doesn't matter if it's a dog, a cat,
Mm-mm.
a sheep, a cow, whatever. It's
And then I wonder if like is this also a side effect of urbanization? Like, do more people fear animals because our city lives keep us distant from them more often than not, unless you have pets. But there are a lot of people who have never even had pets, and therefore their only encounter with animals are probably strays on the street. Maybe if they go to a zoo,
Mm-hmm.
or the pets of neighbors
Mm-hmm.
and friends. So
And it's easy to, as Filipinos, it's easy to go, what? People are afraid of ganyan. But most don't realize that even our urban neighbors are not fully urban. Many of
mm-mm.
us still have provinces. Many of us still go out of town because we live in a country where you can take a drive for 1 hour and you're at the beach, you're at the forest, you're at a volcano. And in other countries, that's unheard of. So when someone says they're from an urban place in another country, typically they have not stepped out of a country, of a city. Whereas us, you know, many of us have actually encountered leeches in our childhood only because we went out of town and went into swamp water or something.
Okay. So Noel, okay, one besides that, that there are some really serious folks that are very crippling and it must be hard.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think when it gets to the point of like being a very clinical psychiatrical diagnosis, then it's like it significantly impacts your ability to function
Mhm.
in sort of normal society because of the fact that when these things happen, um, you can't move and stuff. So, and I think we can distinguish that not everybody like I think there are a lot of things we don't like, and there are things that make us uncomfortable, but not all of them are outright full on
Phobias.
clinical phobias.
Yes.
And then so I get the distinction, and then it's like, and it's sort of like when you have people saying that they are um, between you're sad and then you're clinically depressed, and it's hard to tell the difference. And not that to say that only people who are diagnosed are actually depressed, but because of it is hard to figure out on your own, then maybe it's somewhere along those lines. Okay, so he does share a name of fear of cockroaches as Katsaridaphobia, and we'll try to find it if it's on any of the medical lists. Then if not, then I guess it may be because in the end it's a lot of like since I know the etymology, then I can create a phobia for
Yeah,
anything.
and I think that's the thing. A lot of people have been creating their own terminology, and then thanks to social media, that's the one that gets popularized, or that's the one that gets spread out. So more people start using it, forcing now the communities to adjust to whether or not those are or are not the terms.
Jed was asking is is it only a phobia when it's clinical? So I can't necessarily say that for sure. I think what ends up getting listed are just the statistically common ones. This is not to say that new phobias aren't
Mhm.
coming up every day, and we can't invalidate what those phobias may be.
Wikipedia does mention that in the psychiatric side, there are different areas. So there are social phobias, there are simple phobias, there are agoraphobias. So words that are ending in phobia may include just fears, but may also include, in some cases, more intense clinical conditions.
Hmm.
But as mentioned earlier at the start of the show, the term phobia is not exclusive to psychiatry.
Yeah, it also has chemistry usage
So
and stuff.
that's why you have products which are like these sprays that turn something hydrophobic. Suddenly you can use your shoes in flood water and look, they're still clean.
They're just
Um,
very water repellent.
and then likewise in terms of medical conditions, I think there was a photophobic something we're in. Their photophobia.
Sensitivity to light.
Yeah. So like when you're having a migraine, you're actually becoming photophobic because you can't handle bright lights. So a listener might think, what? So you're afraid of light because you have a migraine? And that's not what the word means.
It's just that you are now sensitive to light. So to describe the condition, they have used the term photophobia, which is
Yeah.
still technically Accurate. Keyboard Fluttershy over on YouTube also agrees there's a line between disliking something and a debilitating fear. And it's just never, I get in on your own, it's hard to determine, I think. Ultimately, you want to seek help. So these are like, at least as based on this 1998 survey, some of the more common phobias.
Mhm.
So we can go over, Toby, this, or do you want to go through like the subsections of the list that are, I mean, there are some that are like very specific that might be shorter and easier to process.
So
first.
Wikipedia breaks it down to psychological conditions,
Mhm.
cultural prejudices, ethnic prejudices, medical conditions, cultural phenomena, phobia in natural sciences.
Ooh.
Excuse me, I'm burping again. Jocular and fictional phobias as the last item in the list, which represent
I guess the
popular
neologisms and whatnot.
fictions and the
Yeah.
like. So starting with that one, there's Chianophobia,
Oh
which
my
is the
God.
fear of Keanu Reeves. It was actually in a
book.
Dean Koontz book,
Obviously a fiction book.
False Memory, where a woman has an irrational fear of Keanu Reeves. There's Nihilophobia, which is from Star Trek Voyager.
The fear of nothing.
Yes.
Nothingness.
Doctor Who has Robophobia, which connects, of course, to the fear of androids and robots because they are such antagonists in the show.
Fear of Uncanny Valley.
Mhm. And then Wallace and Gromit has Arachnophobia, which is a portmanteau of anorak and arachnophobia.
Which
It's
was
also-
used in a comic book. Oh, my favorite is Anatody Phobia, which is the fictional fear that one is being watched by a duck right now. It comes from a Far Side panel, and it is brilliant because it's literally this guy at his desk, and then there's a big window behind him, and then far off there's a duck. I'm gonna find it. All right, so but that's like fictional phobias.
So moving forward, while Rocky's looking for that, in terms of natural sciences, so there's thermophobia when something's has an aversion to heat. There's super hydrophobe, wherein it's extremely difficult to get something wet. Mentioned earlier was photophobia. Others include heliophobia, which is aversion to sunlight. And then there's acidophobia, which is the object has a preference for non-acidic conditions.
Okay, I found the duck panel. Sorry. Ooh, I like the chemistry ones though. Okay, let me pull up the tab, and so this is the comic. See, the fear that somewhere somehow a duck is watching you, and you have the guy, but then there's the duck in that window. It's so far away. But yeah, I'm a big Far Side fan, so just wanted to share.
So when it comes to medical conditions, and notice medical is more the physical and not the psychological.
It's still not about fear.
Yeah.
It's just like descriptions of your body responding or not
So
responding.
as
to certain
mentioned,
things,
it's photophobia, which is aversion to light. There's phonophobia,
which
where
is
you're-
aversion to sound.
you become hypersensitive to sounds. And then there's osmophobia, where you're hypersensitive to smells, which I think in the Philippines means you're pregnant.
What?
Yung naglilihi ka, and then you don't like the smells, you can't stand this and that.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know
It's a
about that.
very common Filipino claim by pregnant women.
But to be fair, I
The
mean, like
hypersensitivity.
my family member when pregnant, could probably normally tolerate durian on a bad day,
Mhm.
but then when pregnant, no,
Mhm.
absolutely none of that. If you're gonna eat that, get out of the house. It's like that bad. So does not want to smell it at all. So I understand like, yeah, I guess it's the thing that happens.
Now we'll skip past the ethnic and cultural ones.
Yeah, those are just. Let's
Um,
not do that.
There is no reason that they are good phobias, but sadly, the fact there are words for them show.
They happen statistically common enough.
Yes.
Okay.
So let's now move on to this long list of things in an alphabetical order, which is the psychological ones now.
Okay.
I'll start from the bottom.
Or if you want, I can do a quick. I just have a quick list of a few more unique ones,
Okay.
and we can double check yours, and then we go through your full list on Wikipedia.
Okay.
Okay. So on this Healthline article, they cite a few more that. So they say that specific phobias tend to be incredibly specific.
Mhm.
Some so much that they may only affect a handful of people at a time. and they are difficult to identify because most people don't report unusual fears to their doctors, which makes sense. It doesn't sound common. Why should I report it? Examples of some of the more unusual phobias that have supposedly been discovered include Electoraphobia, which is a fear of chickens.
Mhm.
Which, wow, I mean, like, I get ducks, but chickens, okay. And then
Chickens are scary.
Anamatophobia, which is a fear of names.
Mm.
That is like bordering on that fear of yourself, or I don't know if it's being called names, and things like that. Pogonophobia, which is a fear of beards, not the women, but actual facial hair. Nephophobia, which is a fear of clouds, which feels like a subset of, like, did we break apart the storm? There are people who are afraid of the thunder and lightning. And
Was
those who
there
fear the
someone
cloud.
who looking out the window starts to panic when they see clouds?
Yeah, it's kind of. I wonder how you discover these things. And the last unique phobia cited on this article is cryophobia, which is the fear of ice or the cold. But I get this. This is kind of scary. I mean, like, when I think about cold weather conditions and then the possibility of dying in the snow, it gives you the heebie-jeebies. I've gotten like chills reading, which is not ironically, not funny saying, but I've gotten chills reading a book describing someone borderline freezing to death. And it's
I
like,
always wonder about
tense.
that though when it comes to the clinically crippling phobias. Is it in that way wherein this then leads to this thought process, or is it only that?
And I think it's
See?
hard. I think it's hard to say, which is why a lot of like people who go to therapy for phobias, a lot. I think my understanding, a lot of it is trying to unpack it and trying at the root cause. Like, why is this a trigger for you? You know, and it's a difficult process, and you really have to go in. But it's interesting.
So like some people will say they're afraid of water, but really what they're afraid of is the dark thing beyond that you can't tell what's deep down there,
Yeah.
which is not therefore the fear of water. It's a fear of what's in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, you have people who might be afraid of flying, but they're not really afraid of flying. They're just more afraid of being in a storm, or they're afraid of being trapped.
Or maybe it's claustrophobia.
Yeah.
Things like
So
that.
it's the different possible aspects.
Ultimately, it is why there are medical professionals who try to help people through these things, and a lot of these social phobias need a lot more unpacking. I mean, it is only the first step when you think you identify that you have a phobia like this, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have determined it yourself. It's always good to seek professional advice to narrow it down.
So Noel shares, I know women naman that are smokers. Oops, it moved.
Then they get pregnant and can't stand the smell. Then
Mhm.
after they give birth, they go back to smoking.
Mhm.
It's totally true, because you have to understand that when a person, when a woman goes through pregnancy, it's like as intense a hormonal change as puberty.
Mhm.
It is a super overhaul of your system. So that's why uh, taste, smells, things, a lot of things change
Mhm.
during pregnancy. Noel also cites, of course, from the friend side, that fear of chickens and ducks, had that fear. And yes, friends reference. Yes. Okay. Jed says he once had a friend who was often afraid that he was sick with something, and he kept seeing the doctor. And there are known medical conditions related to this, and I think we're gonna probably stumble across them.
So moving from the opposite end forward, Xanthophobia exists, which is the fear of the color yellow.
Hmm.
There's the sad workplace phobia, which is the fear of the workplace.
And it doesn't have a fancy name; it just says workplace phobia.
There's the verminophobia, which is the fear of germs, but I hope it's the more official term. There's the vehophobia,
Vehophobia, like vehicle.
which is
fear
the
of
fear of driving.
driving.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was diving. That's why I was confused. There's the tripophobia, which is the fear of holes.
Or textures with a pattern of holes, like as we were talking about at the beginning
And
of the
then
show.
there's trypanophobia, which is the fear of needles and injections.
Oh, okay. There is a specific term for it.
The one that's the fear of the number 13.
I will try to read it. Triskaidekaphobia. Ooh, that's a mouthful.
There's the trichophobia, the delusional fear of something in the roots of hair that stops it from growing.
Or
Or
a
the
fear
fear
of
of
hair
hair
loss. Oh, okay.
Traumatophobia, fear of having an injury. Toxiphobia, fear of being poisoned. Tonitrophobia, fear of thunder.
What? There's an individual fear of thunder apart from lightning. How dare you?
The tomophobia, fear of invasive medical procedure.
Ooh, I feel like I know friends who like are very concerned about going in for medical procedures. I mean, I think, and that's a thing that really happens.
I'm curious to why it's tomo. Wait, I want to see.
You want to see the etymology?
Injury phobia, fear of surgery, children, adults. Fear of dental work is the more common version of this.
Okay.
Uh,
It doesn't give an
they did
etymology.
not explain. Okay, never mind. I'll look for it some other time. But it's basically medical fear is the general term for it.
They lumped all the medical stuff together.
So there's tocophobia, fear of childhood or childbirth or pregnancy.
Oh, okay.
Thermophobia, intolerance of high temperatures. Fanatophobia was the fear of dying. I feel though this is weird in the sense that isn't the condition more that there's a majority who have no fear of dying? There's a minority who have no fear of dying, while everyone else has a general fear of
But
dying.
we don't have a debilitating fear of dying. Everybody doesn't like the notion that we're going to die one day. But then there are certain people who like super obsess about it.
So thalassophobia is the fear of the sea or the fear of being in the ocean.
On a side note though, Fanatophobia is kind of badass as a name because you get to have Thanos in it. Anyway, sorry.
Um, so Tripophobia is the fear of the number 4.
Tetraphobia.
Tetraphobia.
To connect to the shape.
Teratophobia is the fear of giving birth to a monster or a disfigured fetus.
Mother of monsters moment. Okay.
There's the telephone phobia, the reluctance of making or taking telephone calls. So this is definitely a new thing, which
we talk about this every now and then. Like there's a lot of social media posts about people who complain so much about getting calls and not getting warned
but I
that they're
guess
going to
it
get
has
called.
gotten to the point that it's debilitating, maybe because of associations.
Maybe they received a bad call
and they
and
don't
then
want
now they
anymore.
become anxious about all future calls. I only say this because I mean, like, we come from the generation that we grew up before caller ID. So you didn't have a choice. When the phone rang, someone has to answer it. And then if it's a crank call, even though they keep calling, you still kind of answer until you like leave the phone off the hook. So it's just different experiences.
So moving on, technophobia, fear of advanced technology, also known as Luddites, according to Wikipedia.
Okay.
Tapophobia, the fear of graves,
Oh.
or being placed in a grave while still alive.
Ooh. I feel like, well, not a full-on phobia. My grandmother had certain concerns about this, and thus she was like, cremate me when I die because she doesn't want to wake up in a coffin.
Submechanophobia, the fear of being partially or fully submerged in man-made objects.
Oh, okay. And there's like, in some of my theme park videos, there are some that super explore this, looking at amusement park rides that are water damaged. So amusement park animatronics that are in the water and then they decay and then they become extra scary. So there's a whole video series.
Stacyphobia, the fear of standing or walking.
Wow. Okay.
Spectrophobia, the fear of mirrors. Somniphobia, the fear of sleep. Sociophobia, the fear of people or social situations. Siderophobia, the fear of trains or railroads.
See, that's another one that feels very like modern. I mean, like not just recent years, but like it's when it's specifically tied to a technology, it kind of fascinates me. So that it's something that we learned to fear because it developed.
Sexophobia, the fear of sexual organs or sexual activities. Scopophobia, the fear of being looked at or stared at. Then there's roller coaster phobia, the fear of roller coasters. Ranidophobia, the fear or dislike of frogs.
Oh, and they cite it is a zoophobia, which is a fear of animals. So the fear of animals, I guess, is the catch-all. And then I guess it's very possible to have fears of specific animals. So maybe the fear of insects is the same. Then things like fearing cockroaches is just a subset of the insect phobia.
Radiophobia, fear of radioactivity or X-rays.
Which again, modern. It's like
Pyrophobia, fear
technology.
of fire. I guess is the very first one. No, no, that would be still darkness or something.
yeah.
Pteromerhanophobia.
Oh, it's another term for fear of flying. Or maybe it's a more specific in a flying vehicle.
Or maybe it's just the fact that Wikipedia is commonly sourced crowdsourced information.
But they do cite on the fear of flying article, look that it's like if you hover, it also includes flight phobia, aviophobia, and aerophobia.
As I brought up earlier, parang with everyone using the term, it's getting absorbed na lang because it's already a common term.
Oh, Noel, of course, jokes. Is there an opposite phobia of not having sex? It's called quarantine. Okay. Or a derivative of cabin fever. So we stopped at flying. What are we gonna look for?
It's gone.
Okay.
For pyrophobia, the color purple.
The color, not the book.
Pornophobia, the fear or dislike of pornography. Pogonophobia, the fear of beards.
Yeah, we cited that.
Phonophobia sounds phobophobia, the fear of fear itself.
Wow.
Or of having a phobia.
It's a self-referential phobia. Okay.
Philophobia, the fear of love. Phasmophobia, the fear of ghosts. Pharmacophobia, the fear of medications. Palophobia, the fear of erections.
There is a fear of erections, ladies and gentlemen. But to be fair, there are people out there whose erections are very scary.
Pagophobia, the fear of swallowing. Pedophobia, the fear of babies or children.
Oh, okay.
Which is actually not as uncommon.
Yeah.
I
There
know
are
a lot
some
of
who are
people
disturbed
who
by
freak out.
babies.
We're super freaked out when there's a kid nearby. They don't like their eyes. They don't like how they gaze.
Really? Oh, okay.
Panophobia, the fear of everything or the constant fear of an unknown cause.
Oh, so that's like a catch-all. Okay.
Then you have Ostraconophobia, the fear of shellfish. It's a zoophobia. Osmophobia, the fear of odors. This is like Dune reference.
But it's a bird prefix. Ornithophobia is the fear or dislike of birds. Another zoophobia. Okay.
Ophthalmophobia, the fear of being stared at.
Oh, it's
So
another.
similar to the scope. Kasi the scope sounded like scopes.
Yeah.
So
And then
this sounds
ophtha is
more-
eye look.
So this feels more accurate and that feels more common use.
Because you're afraid of telescopes. Okay.
Ophidophobia, fear dislike of snakes.
Oh yeah, we cited that.
Anerophobia,
Anerophobia.
fear of dreams.
Mm.
Ometophobia.
Fear of eyes. To be fair, though, I'm very conscious how often I say to be fair. You can stare very deeply into a person's eyes, and then when you really see all the different like structures it gets kind of creepy.
Yeah, it suddenly reminds you of a lot of things in the world.
Galaxies, even.
Yeah.
Okay.
Odontophobia, the fear of dental fear. Oikophobia, fear of home surroundings or household appliances.
Wow, that's so specific, and it's OIKO. Wow, oikophobia.
Oikos.
Oh,
What is that?
you want to look at it up? Okay. Greek yogurt.
It means ecology or economics.
Oh, interesting. I wonder how it became appliances. Okay.
I guess it's family
Environment.
things around you.
Yeah.
And then obesophobia, fear of gaining weight.
Mm.
Nyctophobia, fear of darkness, board game.
There's a board game.
Numerophobia, fear of numbers. Nostophobia, fear of returning home.
Oh wow.
Nosophobia, fear of contracting disease. There we go. That's probably something close to what we're going through now. Only not disease, virus.
No, because the disease includes different medical conditions.
Yeah,
including
but
viruses.
I feel like it's gonna
Be
become a
specific.
distinct.
Mm.
Ano.
Okay.
So
Valid.
nosocomephobia,
Fear of hospitals.
yeah.
Yeah,
No.
there are people don't like hospitals.
nomophobia, fear of being out of mobile phone contact.
Oh wow, which is so funny because it feels like no more phone, nomophobia.
Yeah, which again I feel is a common use.
Yeah.
Not some real.
Not real, but then not clinically
Yeah,
determined.
sorry.
Like-
Not. Yeah, that's the best way to say it. Noctiphobia, fear of night.
Ah,
Then we have a long list of terms for fear of newness, novelty, or change.
oh. It
Um,
includes like neophobia.
yeah, none of this is familiar to me.
Mm.
Then we have fear of death or the dead, which is necrophobia. We have a long list to go. So let's now target the more specific ones that are interesting. Like there's mere mechophobia, the fear of ants.
Wow. How come that got listed and not roaches? Okay.
There's
Cophobia.
Megeriophobia, which is the fear of cooking.
Oh, but right below it is masklophobia, the fear of people in mask costumes and mascots. Oh my god, this must not make the pandemic even better.
There's a fear of butterflies.
Yeah.
There's
Oh wow. Componophobia is a fear of buttons on clothing. It's so specific. It's not even just buttons.
and it has a footnote. It was
It's in a psychology book.
Mhm.
Oh.
Fear of travel is
Would anyone have a fear of travel these days? I think people miss
Photophobia.
travel.
Fear of obtaining pleasure.
Oh, then
It's the closest thing, I guess.
yeah, interesting. Okay. There's a fear of being touched. Okay.
Fear of nudity is also present.
Right below it is the fear of adult women.
Mm.
It's like the inverse of fearing babies.
There's fear of sexual intercourse.
Oh wow. Okay.
Coitophobia from coitus.
But no,
or
but I get that, and I feel like there's a lot of
Xenophobia.
people with trauma who end up dealing with this.
Fear of marriage, fear of laughed at, fear of becoming too cold. Aver-
Mitch is asking, have we seen a fear of clowns on the list?
yes, there was a fear of clowns. It was earlier in the list. Let's jump. Clowns is Caulophobia.
Chlorophobia. Yeah. Oh, there is a term for the fear of clowns. Oh, right below it is cyberphobia, a fear of computers. Huh.
There's a fear of clocks. Chronomentrophobia. There's a fear of time and time moving forward, which is chronophobia.
Which is still different from fear of clocks.
Yeah.
Which feels like it's related to a fear of aging, if there were one. I mean, if you're worried about the passing of time. Definitely that fear of getting disconnected. Okay.
There's the fear of books. Bibliophobia.
That makes me sad. But I can understand.
There's also the fear of adult men.
Oh, to match up the gynophobia.
Yeah. And yeah, so there.
Agoraphobia always stands out for me only because there's this great movie back in the day called Copycat,
Mhm.
where Sigourney Weaver is a survivor of an assault,
Mhm.
but then the backlash is that she becomes agoraphobic, so she stays at home all the time and only has like an attendant who visits and helps her, keeps her groceries resupplied and whatnot.
Mhm.
But then she is a brilliant psychological profiler for serial killers, and so they try to get her help, but then she won't leave the house, so she'll just keep calling in tips and the
Mhm.
like, and then of course it culminates with her needing to deal with her fear, but it's still a problem. So yeah. Noel asked about. Well, we didn't include the cultural ethnic ones because they're not legitimate phobias. They're not phobias along that nature, but they're used to describe
It's the prejudices.
prejudices.
And the like.
So they're not the kind of fears we're talking about.
Yeah, because we don't see them as fear. We see them as a different emotion that is tinged with fear.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But not primarily driven by fear. Yeah. Okay.
so having discussed a lot of the phobias, having discussed a lot of different fears, let's now talk about facing them.
Or how? Well, I guess take a step back. How to deal with them. Okay. And then the most common advice is to face your fears, but admittedly, it is hard depending on how severe the fear is. So while the general advice is always to face your fears, um, this is not. I think this is not a good time to rip off the band-aid.
Mhm.
Like you're going to need to figure out a method a progression for facing your fear in smaller doses. That's just me. I'm not a professional of any sort, but
Yeah.
it's hard to just say I'm going to face my fear and then I'm going to plunge into, immerse yourself into whatever it is you are most afraid of, unprepared, without support,
Yeah.
and the things.
I think when it comes to facing your fears, um, it's it it's sort of, I guess you could say, it's in those attempts that you will realize whether it's something you can try to take down bit by bit, or whether it might be something that requires more professional help.
Mm.
Because it's easy to like say, I don't want to do it, I'm afraid to, and your friends might say, no, no, you have to face it, you have to try. And then as you try, you realize, okay, maybe it's not so bad. But then if you attempt and you try and you find yourself still crippled to the point that you drop and you don't want to, or you lash out or what, then it's now time to consider that that's not just a normal fear.
I guess anecdotally, I would say that the severity of how bad a phobia affects you
Mhm.
should also scale with the care in which you deal with it.
Mhm.
So if it is like totally debilitating, like you can't move kind of fears, these are things that you don't want to rush into dealing with
Mhm.
alone.
Yeah.
And whether seeking help means at least friends or close family, um, or professional help, I mean definitely this is the time to think about it. Versus like, if it just makes you uncomfortable but you're still functional, then
Mhm.
maybe these are things you can face alone, or or face more readily, without like seeking professional help. And that's just my off the cuff, non-professional advice. Please always, like, do what's best for you and consult your doctors accordingly. um I going through that though, and I don't know if you want to talk about it, but because before you were very afraid of dogs,
Mhm.
and then things shifted only after a certain point.
Yeah. So I never understood why I was afraid of dogs.
Yeah, that also fascinates me.
Because we had dogs at home. And it would always be, a nice dog, cute dog, but the moment the dog comes closer, I panic. I run for the door. I climb up the closest surface. I just can't be too close.
Mm-hmm.
And this was even before I got bitten.
Mm-mm.
Um,
So you'd think, Sana, like it would make sense if you had gotten bitten, and then from that point on,
yeah,
you'd be
yeah.
worried. But
But
then it was
even
there to some degree.
even at a young age, I was already getting freaked out whenever dogs would be coming close. But I always found them cute. But then after I got bitten, now I had more trust issues.
Mm.
Na
That just
even if they're
reinforced
cute,
it.
ayoko na.
Yeah.
And um, it reached a point that I'd get teary-eyed when there would be dogs near me. Even if they were friendly, even if everyone is reassuring me they were friendly, it just was not something I was willing to risk.
Mm.
Um, but then, we had our time with that dog Poi Poi, and um, I actually don't clearly remember the first few moments of playing with him.
Mm.
I think I still blocked it out. I do remember there was a moment Poi Poi was on my lap,
Yeah.
but it's still hard to remember the details.
That's it's and and it's interesting, and it's not, and this wasn't like we decided it is time to deal with your fear of dog.
Mm,
It just kind of happened because the
mhm,
dog was there,
mhm.
and then yeah, I was surprised that eventually you came around.
Yeah, because suddenly I was like cuddling with the dog, and we were lying on the couch and all that. But whenever now I try to think back of like the moments leading up to that moment, I don't remember.
Hmm.
What I do remember is freaking out. There was a dog, not wanting to go in the unit. Parang I was at the door or something, and I was like freaking out. There's a dog in the unit, and then I don't remember that much.
Huh. Interesting.
I do remember more um, being able to nuzzle closer with the dog's face towards mine, um, touching the face and all that. But it's a vague memory for me. I have clearer memories pa with Yoshi. I remember him as a puppy hiding under the couch and all this and that. It's more distinct memories.
Mm-mm. And because by then you were okay, na. I mean, like you
So
were like the. I'm sure there was still some degree of fear,
mhm.
but then it was a lot more manageable. And then but even now you still get a little tense around dogs.
It happens again now. I notice. I think since we haven't had a dog in a while,
Mm.
I'm starting to feel mistrusting again of dogs.
Interesting. Interesting.
So there's that moment of dog na naman. But then a part of me is like, I wanna say hi. I wanna touch the dog. And then when it looks at me,
And I think that literally, like, when you talk about the irrational, the Wikipedia cited there,
Mhm.
a lot of these fears they feel irrational only because the conscious part of you is like, I like dogs,
Mhm.
but then there is a part of you that is terrified and doesn't, and it's strange. I only ask only because I don't remember having any distinctly overwhelmingly strong
Mhm.
fears. I mean, like, sure, as a kid, I was uncomfortable and scared of the dark, but then I got over that over time. And then um, I also generally feel uncomfortable with certain insects like roaches, especially when they're flying. I totally agree. But even like I know there are times like I generally don't care about moths
Mhm.
and or like gamo gamo. But then when there are a lot of them, I know I start to feel physically uncomfortable,
Mhm.
but I wouldn't necessarily say it's an outright fear of mine. But it could become something like that if I'm not careful.
Mhm.
I think the closest behavior for me, which wasn't quite a fear, but it just always felt very morbid, was that as a kid, and I'm talking like early grade school years. There was this period in my life that I kept imagining how I would die,
Mhm.
and it was literally anywhere I would go, I would imagine what could possibly happen that would lead to my death.
I had similar childhood moments.
Which in the most common being like I was dealing with a lot of vivid imagery whenever I take a bath
Mm.
because I'd always be afraid of slipping and hitting my head and
I
bleeding out.
the bathroom was a safe space for me as long as my eyes were open.
But so for me it was like any point in time,
Mm.
any location, I would suddenly start imagining how I could possibly receive lethal harm. And I think it led to me being a very careful child
Mhm.
because of the fact that on some level I was constantly watching out. So it was like it was like Final Destination thinking.
Mhm.
Like you're constantly on the prowl and watching out for death. And that's how I felt like I was constantly like trying to outthink the possibilities, which I guess the side effect was semi positive because I was a very careful and um, uh, thoughtful, considerate child who did not rush too much into things. I don't know. It looks better in hindsight than it was at the time. Any I guess anything else you want to talk about when it comes to facing fears though? Because yeah, I don't want to be overly dismissive and just say face your fears. I mean
Mm.
that I think that belittles or that demeans the validity of people who have very strong
Mhm.
fears of things. So I don't know what would you what would you discuss
I
or
guess what I can add would be it helps to try to take a step back and study why you are having the reaction. Um, if it's really irrational, then it's really irrational. But in other cases, you might realize that you're associating the fear to something, but the root of what you're afraid of is something else. So, like one might say, oh, I'm afraid of relationships, but maybe they're really afraid of commitment, or maybe they're really afraid of
being
getting
dumped?
heartbroken,
Yeah, yeah.
or maybe they're being afraid of not measuring up to something.
Mm,
And those are a lot of different other reasons, which don't necessarily mean you shouldn't be in a commitment. Diba? Likewise, um, there's always the performance anxiety related fear, whether it's performing an art or doing
public
a
speaking.
presentation, public
Mm,
speaking. Um, but then it can even be as small as cooking a meal, or doing certain work, or um, handling a responsibility. Uh, so is the fear really because you're afraid of the attention, or is it more because you don't want to be embarrassed,
Mm.
or is it because you tried before and you felt like you humiliated yourself, so ayaw mo na maulit? And they're not meant to belittle. They're really meant to help you identify what you're trying to overcome. Diba?
Noel shares, he thinks sharing your fear with someone helps to having that support, or even
Mm.
just someone who knows about it and will be careful, I guess, not to trigger it. Yeah, and I think this is what I will, I guess, my what I will always stress is that we I make a lot of mentions about professional help, and that's like admittedly a safety statement.
Mm.
Like in the end, um, a medical professional is always the best angle.
Yes.
But at the same time, I understand, was this access to medical help is difficult for
Mm.
many, um, whether it is because of circumstance or cost
Mm.
or whatever constraints. What I would say though is that the when you think about therapy, a lot of therapy is talking to someone about your problems,
Yes.
and I think, and we look at how therapy is often depicted in popular media, and it seems overly simple that it's always just one, the person seeking therapy just tells stories, and then the therapist will listen, maybe give advice
Mhm.
or medication.
Yeah.
But I think what in general though, there is, I will always say that there is a power in talking about your problems, especially when it comes about feelings. I mean, feelings are nebulous, are intangible, hard to define.
Mhm.
I think that a lot of human language is devoted to trying to capture feeling into words. Words are never perfect representations of concepts,
Mhm.
they are merely approximations, they are shortcuts for
Yeah.
the purpose of communication, that when I say this, we both understand generally what you mean, but there are still nuances that may be lost between the two
Mhm.
people using the same word. But the exercise of putting your things as intangible as your thoughts and your feelings and your worries into words, I always feel makes them a bit more tangible,
Mhm.
makes them have shape and form, and then you can deal with them better. And this
Yes.
is why for me, that is manifested in me blogging on a regular basis. Like
Mhm.
I constantly try to write about my day because it's my way of mentally unpacking at the end of the day and processing things and being able to examine it from outside of myself. Okay. Alfred is here. Hello, Alfred. And he shares about how meditation helped him and a lot of therapy. And yeah, and I think I know a lot of people who have been changed for the better for because of meditation or meditative practices like yoga, Pilates, and related arts. Or some, it's because of hobbies that are meditative to them. So even things like Noel's knitting, some people it's taking care of plants.
And for some people, it's prayer,
Yes, it can be
because
prayer, which is a
prayer,
form of meditation in
prayer,
itself.
or some would say meditation is a form of prayer, depending on your
Yes,
perspective.
that is true.
But yeah, giving that's the thing about words, that it's a double edged. It's not really double edged, but it works both ways. Just as you know, thinking you have a crush on someone won't really grow until you say, "Alam mo, crush ko yan," and then all of a
It
sudden,
makes it more
yes.
real. Yeah.
Likewise, a fear um, becomes something you have some power over. Because the interesting thing is, when it's something like a crush, giving it, verbalizing it makes it strong because it's now real. But then it's a positive feeling, so it grows. Whereas when it comes to negative things, when you don't gain control over it with words, it grows.
Mm.
Diba? So you're afraid of this, you're not talking about it, that's growing. Because now it's infecting other things that you're afraid of. Now it's making you realize this is all interconnected and everything is fearful. But as you speak about it, others then help you gain perspective on what you're talking about. And you suddenly realize, okay, maybe it's not that scary from this angle. Maybe I can hold it in this
It's
way.
not as big as you think it is,
Mhm.
because when you put it into words, then it becomes a more defined
Now,
shape.
sometimes it does become bigger. because as you talk about it and in the discussions, oh, okay, maybe you're not just afraid of flying. Maybe this is more about what happened to you in ganyan, ganyan. And that's not a bad thing still, because that then helps you.
You're going dead into the root of the
Yeah,
problem.
that helps you find direction. That helps you understand better what's going on. If you need professional help, then now you have at least more of a reason to define it. Sorry, not more of a reason, a better chance to define it. Because admittedly, when you take professional help, they'll ask you, so tell me about it.
Yeah.
And if that's the first time palang you'll talk about it, it will be a struggle.
Mm-mm.
But if you've already been talking about it with others, then you're able to enunciate those perspectives and what you understand it to be, what you think it's not. And I think one of my favorite visuals for therapy and stuff is you have that guy who's like talking such a mess, and then the therapist is like using it to weave it into a ball. Kasi ina-untangle niya yung mess and then
Mm.
naayos niya. And that's what it is. Therapy isn't I cure you. It's I'll help you work out what all this is. But beyond that, it still will have to come from you.
Yeah, yeah, you got to do the work. You have to do the work, and regardless of what form that takes, it's a journey that you will determine with whoever you're seeking help from or your medical professional and the like. But it is an important one, especially because ultimately it starts with you deciding that you want to deal with the fear,
Mhm.
that you want to deal with this phobia, that you want to overcome it, and therefore I will get help to do that and things like that. It's a lot. What Toby was mentioning, it reminds me of. It's along the lines of how a lot of addiction therapy, especially when they all practice a lot of group therapy. A lot of it always begins with, "Hi, I'm my name, and I state the problem."
Mhm.
It is by acknowledging, by being honest that you have a problem is when you can begin to deal with it.
Mhm.
But acknowledging it, even if it's just in words, in the end, in time, you will fully believe it and process it and
Mhm.
be able to move forward.
And as odd as it is to relate it, in many ways, that's why coming out also feels so powerful
Mm, mm.
because a lot of not coming out is because it's surrounded with fear. There's a lot
Yes.
of I don't know what ifs, but what if?
And therefore, I'd rather not talk about
Yes.
it. I
Um,
don't like labels.
but then when you come out, and it's not even the big come out, when it's coming out to someone,
Yeah, even if it's
that
just
that
one
small person,
close
that's
friend.
that small
Yeah.
moment of I think I like guys too. That moment suddenly you feel that power over the fear to some extent. You suddenly can hold it better. You suddenly grasp it more, and you get the better direction in life.
Mm-mm.
So a lot of the fear is always because you're in that nebulous state, and the human mind is wired to look at the worst possible situations because that's part of our survival
That
mechanism.
is true.
Diba? When you're on a raft in the ocean and people start thinking, "Oh my God, what if there's sharks? What if there?" That's your survival mechanism at work.
You're preparing that. What will you do if there are sharks?
Now, it doesn't mean it's unhealthy, but it can get unhealthy if you're content with just living in that moment.
Mm.
Because sometimes you'll just have to risk looking into the water to check. And in fear, it sometimes has to be talking about it because it is scary na parang what if I talk about it and yung pala it's bigger. Diba? That's an honest reason to be afraid to talk about it.
It's a valid thing to be concerned about.
But knowing is bigger is a good thing because then you know it's bigger compared to before na maybe
I
it's
thought,
small lang,
yeah,
I can ignore it and then you'll find out later. It's just bigger.
yeah. It's along the lines of like when you finally get a medical checkup and then
Mm-mm.
they find something else. Then
Mm-mm.
aren't you glad you got that checkup? So things like that. So yeah. So I think that's a lot. It's a lot to unpack.
I think that's to
Wrap up.
wrap up.
Okay.
Other than Dune,
Okay.
because Dune is our Dune week.
Okay.
But other than Dune, what was your other favorite um, fear presented or confronted in fiction?
Hard to say. Like I can't remember a specific story, but I'm sure I liked a lot of Sandman, Neil Gaiman writing related to
Jed,
fear.
wrap up na.
Um,
We're tired, Jed. I'm so sorry. I've been talking nonstop since 9.
and it's also 10:30. It's like it's not exactly early.
But we can like group chat. Just we'll finish the show.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm sure there is Neil Gaiman writing that I've
Mhm.
liked. I mean, and he approaches the subject many times in different ways.
Yeah.
But um,
But it's more Sandman, not like Death Time of Your Life or
I feel like it's Sandman. I'm not sure. Like I can't remember the specific story. Um, it may not even be Sandman. Baka it's just Neil Gaiman because I've read so much Gaiman. Then
yeah, that's true.
I feel like
Coraline,
whether-
Fear,
yeah.
Anansi Boys, Touches on Fear.
even his
Yeah.
short fiction deals with a lot. So I feel like it's somewhere there.
Mhm.
Um.
So Noel of course shares Yoda.
The Yoda quote. And then a friend mentions he's terrified of rodents or animals that look like rodents. Oh, see, then that's we have determined that this is a subset of zoophobia. There's a general fear of animals, and it seems that there's like room for fear of all specific
Sorry,
animals.
I read Mitch's comment. Duolingo too. I haven't done my Duolingo. Okay,
Fear of the Duolingo owl, I think, is a valid modern fear.
so I think my fear, my fictional fear, facing fear thing that I really like. Um, so it's a tie between two things:
Okay, one is Legion.
Flight of Dragons
Oh, okay, Flight of Dragons. All right.
and Never Ending Story.
The
For
first
very
one.
different reasons.
Okay,
but,
okay.
But you get the idea. Flight of Dragons had a lot of insecurity, a lot of not sure if this is what should happen, especially because he was cursed into the dragon by accident and all this and that. A lot of the threats were fantastic representations of fear, from the ogre to the rats. Oh my God.
Toby's love of Flight of Dragons is fascinating. Like I had not seen the movie until we got together. That was the only time we watched
Such a good movie.
Flight of Dragons.
And it's really cool when dragons have to eat rocks just so they can fly because they float with the limestone. Anyway. But then Never Ending Story had a much more relatable fear. Because it literally was a kid who was being bullied for being a geek. And then he goes onto this huge quest, which has one of the most traumatic moments that shows a boy and his horse.
Yeah.
But man, that movie was
When it's that climax moment of the tone shift, the perspective change, the oh my god, and then
And then-
and it's funny. Again, we're talking in a manner that we don't want to spoil it. And it's such an old movie. It is older than some people who are watching this show right now.
But yes, watch Flight of Dragons if you can. It will be a weird thing to look at because the cartoon is very weird, jerky. Ano parang may kulang na frames yung style.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful.
And then the first never-ending story.
And then the first never.
Never-ending story. The franchise got a little cheaper over time, but that first never-ending story, beautiful stuff. All right. That was an interesting angle to pursue. Think about fiction.
Mhm.
Okay. I wish I had a more specific example, but then I'm gravitating really. I mean, I think it's just the cadence or the way that Neil Gaiman's words come together.
Mhm.
Then I'm sure he has repeatedly dealt with fear time and time again, and then he doesn't say it in exactly the same way, but there's a general similarity of message of facing it and seeking strength. Defining the fear is always important, I think, in his stories, and I super appreciate that. That's always been my approach to things, so that when I'm worried about things, I always examine why am I worried about it? What am I really worried
Do you
about?
visualize him reading the words?
No.
Hearing his voice?
No, not
No, 'cause-
specifically. That's something I only have the benefit of recently because of his masterclass.
But I will
and
admit,
his
if you
interviews.
hear him reading the words, it becomes very comforting.
It does become very comforting. I will concede that point. I think it's sort of with this when you talk about root cause analysis and the whole asking why 7 times. It sounds very corp speak, but at the same time, corporate, not dead body. But but uh, but it goes a long way. I mean, like
Mhm.
the getting into the discipline of trying to apply root cause analysis to personal things is not a terrible thing
Mhm.
to do, because it really is a practice in digging deep and trying to find it. So I always value that, and I that's why I like that sort of self examination before we face
Sorry,
fears.
Noel. I'll try to keep the mouth shut.
Hello, Fred.
So as we close our Dune week, yeah, I'm keeping the mouth shut.
He looks really bad from this angle.
Yeah, it looks very different unless you.
Okay.
Um, so as we close Dune week, we now will face our fear. What's the worst the movie can do?
The worst, the movie can do. Um, um, Way too much Jason Momoa.
Okay.
Like it's gonna be borderline action hero Jason Momoa.
Mm-hmm.
I'm worried if the entire first movie is super action packed,
Mm-hmm.
like ridiculously so. And then I worry. Um,
Don't
uh,
close your eyes. I'm not opening the mouth, Noel.
I, uh, I don't know. I guess my worry will always be that there are so many characters in Dune, and it's hard to deal with them fairly
Mm-hmm.
and to give all of them justice. So it you fall back on caricature. You fall back on maybe too much comedy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like giving Josh Brolin lines like "I'm already smiling." It's like, okay, that's not a book line.
Yeah.
So that's clearly trying to make them more
Yeah, that's what I'm
memeable.
really, really worried about. That
The modern speak.
that galaxy, Guardians of the Galaxy
Mm.
dash on everything.
And I just worry if some of the nuances or the depths of some of the stories will be lost, or the character stories, because like Jessica as the wife uh, of the Duke Leto is a phenomenal character, but um, it can be very easy to mishandle her.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know about that. And then because it is a novel with so many characters, there are things I'm still going to want to see. And we should be back. But like things like the Count Casimir Fenring and his wife, um, it's such a minor point. It's such a minor point. But I was elated when there was a taste of it in the sci-fi
Mm-hmm.
miniseries
The
versus in the it wasn't really present in the 1982 movie. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, like it's generally a if characters are mishandled,
mm-hmm.
or if the depths of some of their stories are lost. Because despite how wide the character list is, uh, they all get a fair amount of like justice sort of in the
Mm-hmm.
end, or significant treatment in the long haul. And I don't know. I am probably going to reread Dune one more time before the release of the 2021 movie. So just to like, I don't know, steel myself for disappointment. It's like this has been a weird tradition of mine ever since Jurassic Park.
Mm-hmm.
And mind you, I was in grade school. Jurassic Park is the first full length novel I've
And
ever
it was
read.
very different from the movie.
Yes. So that was my first encounter with book to screen adaptation disappointment
Mm.
as a kid. So then like I've gone through this time and time again of watching movies based on books I love, and I reread them right before, and then I get disappointed. But to some degree it is the disappointment is inevitable, and it gives me the perspective of always treat the movie as its own thing. It is You will never get a movie that is a faithful adaptation of a book 100%.
Mm-mm.
So that's the way I face that fear, I guess, is
Mm.
accepting they're different.
Otherwise, you can hold Fred. Uh,
Fred's a friend.
Fred, hug Fred.
This looks really wrong.
And that's our show. Thank you so much for watching tonight. Thank you for joining us as we talked about fear, and we hope you'll join us again next time.
If you have questions or suggestions for future episodes, fill out the Google form at bit.ly Baduy Pride Ideas. Thanks again for Mitch for throwing this into the queue, and then we finally found a way to discuss it because of Dune Week. You can follow us on Twitter, Altobi No Shade, RG Suniko.
You could also check out our blog, baduypride.com, for all the previous episodes and stuff about us.
Feel free to continue the conversation in the comments below. What unusual fears do you think you have? What have you done to face them? Maybe sharing your story will help others in the future. And be sure to subscribe for notifications, whether on Facebook or YouTube, so you don't miss our next live stream. Once again, I'm Rocky.
And I'm Toby.
And this is Baduy Pride. Good night, everyone. Have a